Thank you for joining me. Today, I want to talk to you about a very powerful holistic method that I've been using for 15 years, but it's been around for 50 years. And if you're suffering from anxiety, stress, depression, worry, or fear, or if you have children that are struggling from some type of trauma, or even bedwetting, nightmares, and nail biting, beam therapy saved my life many years ago, and I'm very passionate about working with people and supporting them along their journey. Beam therapy is near and dear to my heart. It was created by Dr. Beattie, who I mentioned did save my life. And I have mentored under her, but I also do other methods. But today, this focus is about beam therapy, the bioenergetic emotional access method, and how it can help you. In these uncertain times, these changing times, a lot of people are having their awakenings and they're not quite sure what's happening. And in that, it can be a bit scary. I myself have gone through a lot over the last 15 years, and I like to share my story with my clients, with my friends, in my coaching classes, because when people realize they're not alone, when people realize there are more people suffering, more people going through this awakening, more people going through letting go traumas, more people holding on to anxiety and fear than we're letting on. Most people go out in the day and they can function fine. But when they go to bed, when they're in that quiet time, their mind's racing. And it can be to the point where they're affecting their family life. Because imagine you're coming home and you're not clear in your head. You're not sure if you have a job, or you just might have this like negative feeling that something bad's going to happen. And that can happen as well. So we're going to go through beam therapy. I'm going to talk to it in sections because although you're watching this live or replay, I want to ask the questions and answer the questions about beam therapy that I've been receiving for years. So I think the best way to really do this is to bring up a presentation. And if you feel like you have questions, I have no problems. This can be interactive. You can ask questions if you'd like to ask questions. All right, perfect. So beam therapy, as I mentioned, was created by a medical doctor. And, I am friends with Dr. Beattie. She saved my life, but over the years, I've really come to appreciate her kindness and what she did for me. She's kind of that one that held a tough love and would say, Brenda, you need to keep coming to see me. And I'm like, what is she talking about? I'm pretty okay. But what I realized is I was actually numb and in a lot of trauma, and I didn't realize how much I needed. So the reason I put up this picture is to let you know that, beam therapy was created by Dr. Beattie. I am a practitioner of it, but she's a creator of it. She is a medical doctor in Toronto. She's not going to tell you her age. She's older, and she's now just recently retired. The way she explained beam therapy to me when I first met her and in her course, and I've taken her course 7 times because I had so many questions. We are all perfect diamonds. And you may have heard this there's so much information out there nowadays that said, find that authentic self, let go of the layers, we heal layer by layer. From my understanding and through my work, healing can be either difficult or easy for some. We're all very different. It's based on our beliefs. But what I truly believe is we are all magnificent beings. And at our core, we are already magnificent. There's nothing we need to do. But what gets in the way is our belief systems. It's our traumas. It's those social conditioning that, hey, you're not worthy enough, you don't deserve this. There's a lot of things that come into play that we have hiding in our subconscious background. So beam therapy is a process which goes into the subconscious mind and releases these types of negative or resistance or interference that's holding us back from showing who we truly are. So that is really the basis of beam therapy. And I'm just going to give you don't have to understand exactly what beam therapy is or how it works, But I do want to let you know who can benefit from it. That is a big one. Because when I start talking about beam therapy, I kind of run off at how it works. And I'm just like, you know what? In the end, I've been doing this for 15 years. You don't have to understand it. But what I want you to understand is why it's so powerful. So for adults and teens suffering from anxiety, suffering from stress or worry, depression. Depression is a big one. Nowadays, there are so many kids out there or teens taking antidepressants. I can't believe it. When really it's just numbing, it's hiding. How are you going to get past the causes of your depression if you're just numbing it? Now, I'm not against pharmaceuticals, and I know sometimes there's a time and place for it, but what I would suggest if your child is on antidepressants, they can try something like beam therapy and slowly wean off their antidepressants with their doctor's recommendations. So as we start to feel better, we're like, hey, I don't really need this anymore. And how do we start feeling better? We start to do the work to release the core issues that are creating that. It also can, let me go back to that one slide. It also can work with people having negative thoughts or codependent behaviors, those behaviors that keep us in those really bad places. For children who have nightmares or bedwetting or nail biting, there's a lot of times where we don't even know what's happened to our children, and we're watching our kids and their behavior's off. So something may have happened at school, something may have happened between their friends, and we don't understand it because we weren't there, and they can't verbalize it, but what you're noticing is their behavior has changed. Beam therapy can help with those children. It is a very safe process. I can understand why somebody would say, well, why would I let you work with my child? Well, that's a very, very great question. I get a lot of adults that will actually work with me first before they bring their children to see me. And I believe that's fabulous. And after the parent comes and has a beam therapy session, they're like, wow, this is very different. I feel lighter. I can't explain it. And then their children come in and have an experience that's similar. They can't explain it, but they notice that the child's behavior is different. Now, a long time ago, I fell into the arms of beam therapy. And in doing so, I realized its power, but I didn't realize how powerful it was until I had some sessions, because layer by layer by layer. So as we are releasing the old traumas, the negative beliefs, the ancestral stuff, the past life stuff, because it's a kind of a catch-all. And people will ask me, well, how is beam therapy a catch-all? And it's really interesting because with beam therapy, I'm going to go through a little bit of how it works. But before I get into that, who can it help? It can help anyone of any age. So this is an important point to know. You can be in your 80s, your 60s, your teens, a child. Why does it work for any age? It's because it's being directed by the higher self. The higher self, that's the person, that soul, that connection, knows where they've been, where they need to go. And it's a very gentle but powerful process of bringing up things that are ready to release in a timely manner. So we're asking the person's higher self, allow what needs to come up for healing. And that comes up and it gets let go. And whatever you release in a session is gone for good. But what it does, the aftermath of beam therapy, it changes really the way we cope. It brings more peace, more clarity, more reconnection. It actually deletes dysfunctional patterns. It can delete childhood traumas, PTSS, PTSD. Those are those traumas from events that happen immediately and some happen afterwards. It goes into those layers and starts to heal as those issues or challenges come to the surface. It replaces the dysfunctional, but it keeps the functional. And that's the great thing, because people say, well, see if I get this done, and then the good stuff leaves. And that's not going to happen. Your higher self knows exactly what you need. And that's why we are handing over the process to your higher self. This is not a logical mind, although a lot of people have questions, and that's why I put this together. So what's functional stays, and really what's dysfunctional leaves. It's your higher self is in charge. Now, it's actually like going into the CD-ROM of your subconscious mind. It's the stuff that runs in the background that you don't even remember. A lot of people will tell me during beam therapy, well, Brenda, no, that can't be. I don't remember that. So if that's what's coming out, well, how can it affect me? I don't remember that happening. Then I'll ask, well, how many things do you remember in your childhood? Some people will say, well, I don't even remember my childhood. And then others will say, I have a pretty good memory of my childhood. Sometimes, even if you have a good memory of your childhood, those traumas, those big events that hurt us so deeply get repressed deep into our field, and it hides in our cell memory, in our subconscious. And if these events happen before the age 7, so from your mommy's tummy to age 7, those are really deep within the subconscious mind in the CD-ROM. So that is running a program in your life and you don't even know it. How many of you are working towards a goal, but you always feel like you're being thrown off your goal? Like you're very focused and then you lose your focus. Or you can be very high feeling and then go into depression. You're not sure what it is. It's the human psyche. We have duality, the dark and the light within us. But we are in a time of mass healing. It is a time to reconnect to who we are. It's a time to move forward in healing. And how do we do that? We do the work. Beam therapy is just one method that works. I've been doing it with people for 15 years. I personally have had about 100 sessions of beam therapy over many years. And I always thought, well, I'm really good now. But what it is I could feel things bubbling up and I'd have another session. So it's not that everyone has to have 100 sessions, but it is not a one-time miracle, although there's the odd client or the odd child usually that just flips right away to the positive. But generally when you're dealing with beam therapy, you want to go in with an open mind and say, I'm going to give this at least 5 sessions. Now in the past, I had to do beam therapy one-on-one with one client. And I could bring in, say, a mother with their with their children. Sometimes I could bring kids together because they're all affected by the same trauma. And as somebody is releasing through a beam therapy session, the energy somehow goes through me. It's really interesting, and I'll pick up information, although I don't want to know everything because it's overwhelming of what's leaving. Some key points might come on, or I can feel the sadness releasing. The neat thing is, what people during beam therapy, as they're releasing, may or may not remember what they're releasing. They may remember it well, or they may not remember it. Some people are very much in peace during it. Some people are more agitated during it, and they might be yawning and feeling very uncomfortable, a little bit anxious. But one-on-one sessions, I'm able to give some feedback on what's releasing. We have a bit of a discussion going forward about what's going on, making sure they're all right, all that stuff. So when you have a parent and a child together doing beam therapy, the traumas are the same as they're releasing or somewhat similar linked. They're both releasing, and then a mother can ask their child, are you doing okay? Yes, we are. So the child's in a very safe place as we're releasing. It's very, very, I would say, miraculous on the shifts that we see children have. They go into a better place. They heal faster because they release so much so quickly. Adults, especially adults who had a lot of trauma before age 7, they're releasing a lot, but there's more layers. So you can imagine a 5-year-old child is going to have less layers than someone in their 40s. sometimes we get clients that come in for the very first time and they're in their 60s and they're saying, oh, my life has been horrific and I need beam therapy. I really want to try it out. And they wonder why after their first session, although they felt a huge release, why aren't they feeling different? Oh, then I'll ask, you're not feeling anything? They'll say, okay, yes, a little more subtle peace in my heart, a little more calmness, but I want to show big results now. And I go, I get it. We all want big results now, but healing takes time. What I love about beam therapy is that it's simple, but it's so powerful. And what do I mean by it's simple? The process itself is we go through 10 phrases and we sit across from each other and the client is going to hold different spots. And as those cell memories release, we move to the next one and I guide them through it. What the person or the client experiences might be a little bit uncomfortable, like I said. Generally, what I find with children, they seem very relaxed. They usually say, no, this is all right. And they actually ask to come back and see me, which I find really neat. If you have a child, especially a teenager, teenagers don't like to talk. Now, that's not true. It could be some do and some don't. So I'm doing a generality there. A lot of the teenagers I work with come in, they don't want to talk. They've been doing talk therapy for a while, and they love the fact they can just sit there, go through the process and say thank you and leave. A lot of comments I get from teenagers is, this is the strangest therapy I've ever tried, but I like it. Depression starts to melt away. They slowly go off of their meds with, again, consultation from their medical doctor. Beam therapy and most holistic methods can be used complementary to whatever's happening with their medical doctor. It doesn't have to be one or the other, and I'm actually one that promotes using both because we want somebody to have the support from whatever angle they need to get through what they're going through. So, who is beam therapy made for? Pretty well, it doesn't matter about the age, but you're dealing from anxiety, stress, worry, fear, negative thoughts, depression, even suicidal thoughts. Now, for a younger child, you can just tell the change in their behavior. Sometimes they're more anxious, they're wetting their bed, they're biting their nails, they can't sit still, but they can't vocalize what's going on. Beam therapy can be used for that as well. I have done beam therapy, I'd say over 100,000 clients. I've used it many, many times over the last 15 years. I used to use it for corporate people, family members, friends, and anyone in between. But the coolest thing that just came recently is, although I've been offering group healing calls for the last 4 years in a group setting, I was never given the okay to use beam therapy in a group setting. And that's because to hold the space for someone releasing all that childhood trauma, and I'm not saying all of it because we'll heal later, but all of that childhood trauma or that dysfunction or that dense energy that's in the layer that's been created by the higher self. So the higher self creates a layer. Now, as I'm working with one individual, it's a lot as it comes through me. But over the years, I become a very strong energy worker, somebody who can hold the space with lots of light. And because of that, I have now been given the okay, the encouragement, the inspiration to offer beam therapy in group settings. And that is because of all the training I've done over the last 15 years to get me to this point. But what does that mean for someone who's coming into a beam therapy session? If you're coming into a beam therapy that's individual, it can be done in person or by video. How is that possible? That's another story, but we're talking about quantum healing, and yes, it definitely can be done over distance, and it works just the same. But when you're doing a individual session, the client has that choice to come in person or by video. Now, when we're dealing individually, that person is getting me speaking to them about what phrases came up for them, what's coming up, how it's being released, what's being released, what's coming. I give them more details and they may want to give me their feedback. But now shifting this beam therapy into a group setting. Some people might say, well, how does it work? Well, imagine, and I'm going to limit it to maximum of 15 people per session. And to be quite honest, it might not be for everyone. So when people register, I will then sit quietly and get the okay, this person can come in. To be honest, anyone that gets attracted to beam therapy is usually ready for beam therapy. Beam therapy is not something that's been advertised. Dr. Beattie, who's been doing this for 15 years, didn't really advertise. She always told me, Brenda, the people that are meant to find beam therapy will find it. I, on the other hand, because I'm in love with this method, I like to promote. I like to teach. I like to let people know there's an option for your depressed child. There's an option for you. If you're feeling like you're just so overwhelmed with life, or you have big decisions and you can't make those decisions, beam therapy, as those layers release and you get closer to your authentic self and start to reconnect with your magnificence, that heart intelligence, you'll start to know what's right for you. You'll start to have more courage, more self-esteem, more confidence. You'll start to see the hurts that you had in the past from different eyes. So you're no longer the victim. You start to move into the victor. And that was what the biggest thing that I find with beam therapy. As you're healing, it's changing your perception. It's changing the way you look at things. It's changing the way you deal with life. I noticed huge changes in myself. But sometimes in just a few sessions, I see these miraculous changes in clients. How does that happen? Sometimes the left brain can't understand it. It's not something that we can just say, well, it works this way and I need to understand it. I usually tell clients, come in with an open mind. Allow the process to be what it is. But I did want to give an overview of how the group beam therapy would look. So for those of you who've done beam therapy, you know there's 10 phrases that we ask your higher self. Do we have permission to use this phrase? And in a lot of cases, we get a yes. In a lot of cases, we get a no. So we generally don't do all 10 phrases. We do what is needed at that time. So when we're working in a group, the group live, it has to be live. I need you there as we're doing it. There are no replays for this work. So you sign up for a group beam therapy, you will get a number. With that number, so let's just imagine there's 5 people signed up or 10 people. Everyone gets a unique number and nobody knows anyone's number. I will then prepare before the class and go through what every phrase that's required from each person. So before we start, say person number 2, I'm going to ask them to join in phrases 1, 2, 5, 7, 8, and 9. And then for this person, they're going to join in these phrases. We're going to go through all the phrases together, but you, as a participant, is asked to join the phrases that you were given. Those phrases were given to you or will be given to you because your higher self is saying, those are the best phrases to use to eliminate the layer that has been created for you before the session. Now, there's always the people who say, well, I don't want to just sit around. I'm going to do all 10 phrases because we are going to go through all 10 as a group. Unless there's nobody in the group that needs a phrase. But I can pretty well be sure that we're going to go all through 10. So some people are going to say, I'm doing all of them. And that is okay as well. Because this process is guided by your higher self is going to take what it needs during the process. It's that simple. So it's really neat in that aspect because You're joining, you have your phrases to join, but again, you can join all of them. It's not going to break anything, but you don't have to. You can sit and relax while the other people are going through a phrase that maybe you don't need to be included in. Now, when we're working in groups, there is sacred space created. I generally do all this prep work prior. I ensure our group is there. We're in a safe container or safe sacred space. Everyone is going to join on Zoom. Their videos are off. You have your privacy. You will have a unique link. So if you want to put in a name that no one's going to know who you are, that is okay. But I'm going to know who is on the call. Everyone's unique link will only be used once. Nobody is going to enter the call that should not be there. And if something were to happen, I would just make sure they're out. But I am making this foolproof because I can hold the space easily for 15 people. If somebody buys a link and wants to share it with their child, they need to let me know ahead of time because that child is an extra person or the spouse is an extra person. So it's one link per person. And that's because when I'm feeling the energy and I'm working to hold the space, the maximum I'm going to be working with is 15 people. So, and I'll feel there's more there. And it's really going to only work for the registered people. So if you had a spouse, say, join you, they might get benefit through you, but they're not actually being included with the actual process. Beam therapy is safe. Beam therapy is powerful. Beam therapy can be slightly uncomfortable for some, but others just feel completely relaxed. We are all unique on how we release. So I don't want you to think that because you're feeling anxious during it, that's wrong. No, it's that energy that's leaving, that old energy that's no longer needed, that unharmonized energy needs to leave your system. And how does it feel when it leaves? It really depends on you. And unfortunately, some people have some pretty tougher releases and they're like, how do I make it lighter? And every time it's pretty well, that's just the way they release. So I said, honor it. It's not a bad thing. You're releasing, you feel lighter afterwards. And then there's other people who are very relaxed in it, who want to feel more anxiety. And again, that's the way they release. So I said, enjoy it. We are all unique. I don't want you comparing to someone else on why didn't I feel that or why didn't I do that? Because we're all unique and how we feel is how we feel. Over time, as you start to release dense energy and allow that beautiful, authentic self to shine through, you might become more sensitive. And as you're becoming more sensitive to the release, you might start to have memories of what's releasing. You might start to feel more, hear things. There's a lot of people while they're releasing in beam therapy, will have like a movie playing of all the things they're releasing. That's great for them, but not everyone gets that. But I always let people know while you're releasing with beam therapy, whatever's needed to release will happen. How you feel it is unique to you and just honor it. But what I can guarantee is anything that you release after, like that during that session, is not going to come back. You are going to feel lighter, more connected. You're going to be able to breathe better, sleep better. The benefits of beam therapy are phenomenal. And sometimes they're very subtle. And it really depends how much interference you have, how numb you might be, how much work you've done beforehand. But what I do know is if you were attracted to beam therapy, you're attracted it for a reason. And that is usually when people say, Brenda, I want a beam therapy session, they do phenomenal because they're ready. So I'm really excited to open up this to group healing for beam therapy. It's something that's new. I've got the okay to do it. And then whenever I get a beautiful download saying, yes, you're good to go, somehow in my reality, or the way I guess I expect things to happen, is I then get confirmation. And recently, what was my confirmation? I've met with Dr. Beattie. We were having lunch one day, and she says, you know what? you can go ahead and start doing beam therapy. And I laughed. I said, how fitting is that? I just got the download that I was okay to do it. I can hold the space for 15 people. And now you're confirming what I already know. And I love those confirmations because it's all about synchronicities. We are in a beautiful process on planet Earth. And the more people that heal, if you can imagine that dense energy leaving, that those programs, that self-doubt, the hurts, the pain, as those layers leave, your magnificence shines through, your vibration and frequency increase. And as that increases, you're going to be holding the light more for your family and your friends, your coworkers, and then also for the world. If you are saying yes to the ascension process and you're saying yes to your personal growth, then you're just a little bit ahead of the curve. We're ahead of the curve because there's a lot of people right now that are still in denial. They don't know what's going on. They're confused. They know something's going on in the world, but they don't want to notice it. So then when people start to have their awakening, it can be scary. It can be confusing. It can bring more anxiety because sometimes when you start to know what's going on, you start to have a little more fear. Beam therapy can help release that layer by layer in a very safe way, whether it's individual or whether it's group healing. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I really want to say. I just really want to get online here and put together a video. So it's going to be up there for replays. If there's any questions, people can ask questions. I'm going to maybe add on to this video. I'm just going to go through here. You know, I think the biggest thing is a lot of people will say, well, how can something like beam therapy even work? And I used to think the same thing. I have honors in biology. I did genetics and cell biology. And then I fell into energy work over 15 years ago by accident because my son needed some help. And actually, it was me that needed help. But my higher self guided me to help my son, who had beam therapy done, who changed tremendously and blew my mind. And I'm like, okay, what is going on here? And then it made me inquire, what is beam therapy? How did this work? And which time I was told, you need it. And as I started to heal layer by layer, what I realized is I didn't even know that I was missing a connection to myself. And beam therapy, layer by layer, as my higher self would bring up a new layer, I became more connected to my divinity, more connected to who I was. The connection between my higher self and I started to open up more. Beam therapy, although we're working with the subconscious and all that hidden stuff in our field, it heals us mentally, physically, and emotionally. It allows old hurts, that victim mentality, negative beliefs, past life stuff, ancestral stuff, future life stuff. We're multidimensional beings. So all this stuff is being brought to the surface, again, from your higher self, what is beneficial at that time for release. So it's safe because we're not saying this has to come out or that has to come out. We are doing it in a safe, systematic, layer by layer by layer. So it's not like I'm the practitioner saying, nope, this is what we're going to do. And I don't care what your higher self is saying. It's the contrary. When I work with people, I'm always working with the guidance of the higher self. And why wouldn't I? Because your higher self knows you best, knows what you've been through, where you're going. And then what happens is these beings of light that I have, my entourage, comes in and works with your higher self. So me and the clients are there physically, but we're kind of out of the way as this work happens at a level we might not understand. But what you will understand is the benefit, the lightness you feel, that reconnection that you feel. And it's such a blessing when I can see someone who's come to my door in tears because their life is a mess, leaving with lightness, saying, I just feel 20 pounds lighter. How is that possible? I believe humanity is being supported more than ever before. One beam therapy today in this new energy is like having 3 beam therapies back in 2009. I can feel the shift. It's tremendous. So a lot of people are making fast progress, but everyone's on their unique journey. And as people are moving through their journey and they're releasing and their authentic self is shining through and they're getting more impulses to do other things, you might not only have beam therapy done, you might start eating better. Your relationships are going to start getting better. You have more peace in your heart. So it's all avenues of your life start to change. And when you realize how powerful you are and that you can change your reality, well, that's you taking charge. That's your old stuff that says you're not good enough, you can't do this, getting out of the way. Now you know you're good enough. You know you can do it. And you start making positive changes for your life, for the life of the people around you. If you see your children suffering, if you see someone who has tremendous anxiety or depression, fear, have them reach out. I do discovery calls. I'll let them know if beam therapy is for them. I offer other holistic methods. The reason I'm focusing on beam therapy today, it's one of my go-tos. It's loved by so many. It has changed so many people's lives. It changed my life. It's not the only method I use, but it was the initial method I used to get rid of a lot of the darkness I was in. Again, it heals emotional, physical, and mental, even spiritual. Now I'm going to jump in now because I want to keep this not too long, but I want to jump into some examples of what people have overcome with beam therapy. And I'll give you an example of mine first. So when I first met Dr. Beattie, I was numb, meaning I didn't know the difference between anxiety or depression. I was living to please everyone around me. I was physically ill. I was emotionally a mess. I was mentally a mess. So I was a prime candidate for beam therapy. I didn't know about it, but I fell into it through different means. And when I sat with beam therapy with Dr. Beattie for the first time for beam therapy, I had no idea about energy work. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. But she says to me, "Oh, you're a mess. You really need this." I'm like, "Okay, whatever." And I sat there with an open mind and I went through the process. To be honest, I didn't feel anything the first session. A little bit of peace, but I could not that much. But there was something in my heart that brought me back to it. At about 4 or 5 sessions, I told her, "I don't know. I'm starting to feel something, but I can't explain it in words." And she said to me, "There's a lot happening in your quantum field. Just be patient. You'll feel it." And her thing back then was give it 10 sessions. I tell people nowadays, give it 5 sessions. And the reason is the healing energy nowadays is stronger than it was back in the day. Give it 5 sessions. Don't give up in 2 or 3. Because if for those people who have a lot of trauma, who have a lot of negative beliefs, a lot of pain and suffering, and they're coming to me with this big heaviness, it's going to take time to let you release yourself from it. We can't just make it all dissolve. It would not be something that would be good for your physical body. As we heal layer by layer, we're releasing dense energy, bringing in more light. We have this acclimation that we have to go to before we go to the next layer. So a lot of people want that instant fix, that magic wand. I would say beam therapy is a magic wand, but it's a magic wand layer by layer by layer. But if you watch your progression, you're going to feel how you feel better, your body's changing, your health gets better, you're doing things that are more appropriate for yourself, that are going to bring you in a positive direction. So we heal in the physical, the mental, and the emotional. So for me, I was very sick when I met Dr. Beattie. I was having close to kidney failure. I had a lot of issues going on with my body. But it was all coming from my mind, the subconscious that says you're unworthy, you suck, you're done. So as I started to heal, just with beam therapy, my body healed. And that was not something I was expecting. I was expecting my mind to heal, my emotions to heal. But I then started to heal my body, because it's the unease in our mind that causes the disease in our body. It's all related. So when you come to beam therapy, or if you feel drawn to beam therapy, or you know someone that could benefit from beam therapy, send them my way. I wish I could say Dr. Beattie's still actively doing this. She is not. To be quite honest, I'm trying to see, are there any beam therapy practitioners out there? I remember taking the course 7 times. I taught with her. She let me teach it with her. And I haven't really connected to anyone who's actively doing it. But there must be other people out there, because once you start practicing beam therapy, you don't want to stop, because you see people's lives change in such a powerful way, and they don't have to talk about it. So just in 5 sessions, my body started to heal, but it wasn't just that. Something clicked. I told her there's a feeling inside my heart that I've never had before, and it was a feeling of love for myself. I felt love for myself that I never had before. And I had a lot of trauma as a child. I had a lot of self-doubt, lack of self-worth issues, but it was starting to show in everything I did, in my finances, in my health, in my relationships, in my thoughts. And beam therapy saved my life. So that's one example. But I have many examples, and some are like pretty miraculous. But when I give these examples, I want you to know that we're all unique beings. Sometimes people can have a phenomenal change, shift, and it's so profound. But if I wrote that on my website, everyone's going to think I'm going to have that. And you know what? That person was just ready for that profound shift. Some of us have to heal layer by layer by layer, getting better at a rate that we can handle. But we're all coming in from different histories, different past lives. We came in with different challenges and themes. So please know where you are is perfect. And as you go through your healing journey, whether it's through beam therapy or something else, be patient with yourself and notice the subtle changes. So I had this one lady, and this one's one of the miracle ones. Actually, I've had a few of them, but here's one of them. She comes to my door. She's overweight, and she's crying, and I bring her in, and we have a session. And she tells me about everything that's going wrong in her life. No relationship, hates her job, just everything bad, bad, bad. Well, anyway, one session, and sometimes I see clients again, and sometimes I don't hear from them for a while. And I'll reach out and say, hey, how you doing? She goes, I just sent you an email, as you said that, and then the email came through. She goes, I can't explain what happened, but I'm on a weight loss program, I'm working out, and I'm dedicated. I have a new guy in my life, and he's so sweet. I got a new job, I got a new car. I can't believe how incredible my life has changed since that one session. That's a one session miracle. The reason that happened, because I know there's a lot of people who have these these one session miracles. It was because that person was ready. Now, other people might have more of a gradual shift. Oh, Brenda, I suddenly went home, and after my session, me and my husband didn't fight. This was the first night after the session. I went home and we had dinner, and he didn't say anything mean to me. We didn't fight. And it was actually quite pleasurable. How did that happen from one session? Now, the person says, I still have lots of work to do in my life, but how did it work? I believe that when we go for sessions, whether it's beam therapy or something else, our higher selves know that if we get something tangible to show us that it's working, we'll most likely go back for more. So we're being guided to go back. Just like I went back to beam therapy with Dr. Beattie. I was a mess. I went for one session. I had to drive very far to see her. And when I left, I'm like, okay, what was that? I was all confused. But there was a peace in my heart that I can't explain. And my higher self kept saying, go back. So I went back and I went back. And my life changed. It changed. I can't even, I always tell Dr. Beattie, you saved my life. Now, my continuously, I'm always evolving, changing, working on myself. But I was in a very dark place when I met her. And she brought clarity, realignment, that reconnection, and most importantly, that love with myself that I didn't have. Other other people will have beam therapy, and maybe not on their first session, but maybe about 3 or 4 sessions in, they'll have a memory of something that happened, but they didn't even remember it. But how am I having this memory? Oh my gosh, I forgot about this for like 30 years, and now it's come up and it resolves. It was something that needed to heal from their childhood that they stored deep into their subconscious that came up for healing. Another example, allergies. A lot of people have allergies due to trauma. It could be inside their mother's womb, their mom's having a bad pregnancy, maybe there's a lot of fighting going on, and the mom constantly eating something, and during that eating, there's trauma happening. What happens? The baby associates the trauma with the food. Now the child is born, and they have all these allergies. Beam therapy, as those traumas release, actually have released allergies of food. And I've actually had that happen to myself. I had a big horse allergy. Here's another example, and I think I've used this one in a podcast before, but I really like it because I'm experiencing this firsthand, although a lot of people have had the same experience. So I used to have really bad allergies, and I used to be allergic to horses. But I loved horses, but I couldn't go beside one. I'd have these like red hives everywhere. During a beam therapy session, out of the blue, I had this memory where I walked into a room where The Godfather was playing, and all these relatives were sitting there watching it. And I walked in right where the horse's head was in the bed. I totally forgot about that. And I had this now vision. I walked in, I saw that. I wasn't supposed to be in the room. I ran out, I cried in the bathroom, and I never told anyone. And I held on to that trauma, which caused me to have a horse allergy. And it wasn't until I had beam therapy done, I released this memory, it healed. And then when I went back for my annual allergy test, he's like, how did your severe horse allergy go to nothing? And then I put 2 and 2 together. I heard beam therapy, let it go. I said, oh, I healed it through an energetic session I did with a doctor. Some people have really bad allergies. They may not know what's releasing during the beam therapy, but it might be the trigger, that trauma that's related to a food allergy or some other type of allergy that releases, and all of a sudden the allergy is gone. My daughter had an anaphylactic allergy for walnuts. And that's because when she was born, I was not in a good place in my life, and I kept eating walnuts. And what happened was my trauma was picked up by her, and it was related to walnuts. The little girl had an EpiPen. She hated the EpiPen. She just didn't want it. I said, okay, let's do some beam therapy on you, and let's do it with the intention of releasing this allergy. But it's a catch-all, so it's going to do everything else as well. But we did bring in an intention. And over time, she's no longer anaphylactic. She can touch a walnut now. She's not eating them yet. I keep telling her we're going to do a little more work to release it completely. But the allergist said, I wonder how this happened. She was so severely allergic to walnuts, and now she's not. So allergies, in some cases, I'm not going to say it's a catch for all, but a lot of allergies are due to the trauma associated with the allergen. And as the trauma releases, the allergens lighten up. So that's another benefit of beam therapy. Another one that's coming to my mind is a story from Dr. Beattie with people who have MS. MS is very powerfully released and healed through beam therapy. And the reason being is MS is an emotional disease. Beam therapy is releasing those emotional responses we have that are stuck in our system. So people who have MS, although it's very hard to get them in to a session because they are kind of in an emotional state where I deserve to suffer, I'm unworthy. But when they decide enough is enough and they have beam therapy, Dr. Beattie once told us a story where there's one lady that came in and she was in a wheelchair. She had one beam therapy session and she walked out without her wheelchair. I have worked with MS people and I have seen them gradually get better and better. I have seen people with diabetes get better and better. Another thing that I want to bring up, depression gets better and better. It really depends what people are coming through, but it's physical, mental, emotional. I want to explain something, and this is going to be another chapter that I'll put out there, is people with cancer and beam therapy and how it can help. Now, I'm going to say this based on my many years of dealing with people with cancer. Beam therapy can help with anything, but what I love about beam therapy and cancer is that I'm just going to give it to you like this. A lot of people come to me with cancer, and my first go-to is an energetic session. I'm going to use the word Reiki. It's not really a Reiki, it's more, but it's along those lines of that divine love coming in for an overall healing to reboot the body. And let's say a person comes in, has a session, and I've seen this, stage 4 cancer, and now they're completely healed. They go to the doctor, they don't have cancer anymore. I know people can heal because it's our own selves, it's our bodies that are helping. It's the client that's healing themselves. It's not me. All I'm doing really, it's powerful. I'm holding an energetic space for healing. I'm seeing them in health. They then allow that and they might have a beautiful healing, a miraculous healing. What I've noticed over the years are the clients that have those healings but don't do any other work. So they're back in the same life, the same patterns, the same hurts. What happens? They get a reoccurrence. And the reoccurrence can come in a different form of cancer or a different way. And they'll come in for another, oh, Brenda, I remember when I had this, I worked with you and I felt better. People who are having chemo, when they use beam therapy or Reiki, it can kind of get rid of that icky stuff that with chemo, so they look better, they have more energy. So it works. But what I noticed was the clients that had beam therapy, that changed the way they thought, the way they thought of themselves, their self-love expressed better, their traumas released. Those were the people I never saw with a reoccurrence. So I put 2 and 2 together. Whenever I work with a client, I said, you know what? First thing we're going to do is let's get your body healing. Let's put it in the best possible place for it to heal. But once you get to that state where you're feeling better and things are moving, now it's time to deal with the subconscious. How did you get this disease in the first place? It's the unease in the thoughts that cause the disease. So now let's work with beam therapy, because a beam therapy is going to release the childhood traumas, the negative beliefs, the self-doubt, all that stuff that's hiding in the background that's causing us to be pleasers or not living the life we want. It's causing that pattern of behavior, which is then causing the sickness. So I've been doing this for 15 years. And the one thing that I give clients, if you are dealing with cancer and you overcome it, get the beam therapy done because it's going to change your life. The one thing I get is people are scared of change. Because what, you're going to change my life? Or it's going to change my life? Well, I don't want my life to change. But if the life you're living, with the thoughts that you're living, are not giving you the best possible life and it's causing you sickness, it's that unease causing the disease, why wouldn't you want to go deep in that subconscious layer by layer safely and change your life to the positive? Because your relationships are going to change, yes, but it doesn't mean they're all going to dissolve. It means your relationships are going to get better. You're going to have more boundaries, more self-respect. And as you change, your world changes around you. So the bottom line there is people who have healed from cancer or other diseases, once they got that healing, I always recommended beam therapy to change their life from a different point of view. So they have that self-love, that courage to make those positive changes because it puts them in a new trajectory where that disease is not going to come back because they've changed. So a lot of people will say, Brenda, sometimes I'm worried my cancer is going to come back. I said, why would you worry about that? You're not even the same person you were when I saw you 2 or 3 years ago because you've changed that. They go, yeah, you're right. I'm not. I don't think the same way. I'm in healthier relationships. I'm eating better. I'm loving life more. I said, yeah, you're a different person. You're more in your authentic self. It's shining through. You're living life. And when we are in a very calm state, what happens? Our body's moving like a perfectly machine that it should. We were created with this beautiful energetic system to process emotions. What do humans do? We don't like an emotion, we're in fear, whatever, we get it stuck. Something happens to us we don't like, we don't let it process. Then we have all these stuck blockages and resistance in our field, and then our body can't do what it needs to do because our energetic system's blocked up with all this crap. And what does beam therapy do? Not only beam therapy, there are many different methods out there that work. But if you resonate with beam therapy, then beam therapy is going to work for you. But what it does is it clears away all that mess so you can think clearly, allow that love to go through and change your life in a positive direction. So there are many different outcomes with beam therapy. It's emotional healing. It's a physical healing. It's a mental healing. It's a spiritual healing because you feel more connected to your divinity. I'm trying to think, like, you guys want more examples? I can give you more. Oh, there's another one. Here's another. This is a cute one. Some lady came to me that had a problem getting pregnant. I've only met, actually, it was only a one-time session with this lady. Again, I don't put these on my website because this lady had a one-time session. Doesn't mean everyone has a one-time session. But with this person, she came in and she couldn't get pregnant. So she's trying fertility, IVF, all these things, and it's not happening. Her body is perfectly fine. Her husband is perfectly fine. They can't figure out what it is. So back then I used to offer something called this welcome session where it was a Reiki and a beam therapy. But this one I was being told just go straight to beam therapy. So that's what I did. And during beam therapy, she had a memory come up and she walked into a room and watched a movie with her mom, probably inappropriate at her age because it was about a woman who is giving birth and she died during birth, during the birth process. That image stayed stuck in her subconscious that her body would not get pregnant. It didn't want to die. Pregnancy equaled dying during labor. So as she released this trauma and realized, you know what, that was just a movie, doesn't happen to everyone, she let that go energetically. She then got pregnant within the next month and she didn't need the fertility. It just kind of happened. But sometimes it's those one moments that are stuck in our field that beam therapy will slowly release. Sometimes it's done in one session, sometimes we need many. Other examples, people who are adopted. They tend to have abandonment issues very, very early on because they knew in their mother's tummy they weren't wanted. Beam therapy, one of the phrases deals with abandonment. Now, a lot of clients that I've gone through say, I want to say abandonment during beam therapy. And the higher self is saying, no, we're going to say this phrase. We're not saying abandonment. And they kind of get upset with me. But I said, the reason we're not saying abandonment, this is such a huge trauma for you that it's not beneficial for us to use that phrase yet. Let's let your higher self guide us. And every time a layer is released, it's chipping away at your abandonment issues. And then over time, that abandonment issue comes to a place that is more manageable. And then suddenly in the session, abandonment will come up and we start to release it more directly before we're doing it indirectly under the other phrases. So with the beam therapy process, we are listening to the guidance of the higher self. We are using the phrases that are being given by the higher self. Now, if you want to jump in on a phrase, like I said in a group, and use a different one, it's fine. Because your higher self is going to take what's beneficial for you and ignore what's not needed. So it's really neat how all this works, but we're really trusting the innate wisdom of beings of light that love us so much, our higher self. It is a process that is not a left brain process. We are going with the love that comes through. We are holding the space for this true healing to come through. And it's layer by layer we heal. If you feel guided to beam therapy, book a discovery call. I'd be willing to chat with you. I love chatting with people. Also, the group session is starting up soon. It's my first one, so I'm really excited to do it. I know it's going to be amazing because any group sessions we do are amazing, but this is the first time I'm able to do the beam therapy in a group. So I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that, if there's any questions, you're more than free to put them in. I'm going to go look through my emails and add questions to this in the description, or maybe I'll even add on to this. There was something I did want to say before we ended off, but overall, I will say beam therapy saved my life. I owe a lot to Dr. Beattie. She's a wonderful woman, very wise, and very loving. And I wish she promoted this more. But because of who she is, she doesn't want to promote beam therapy. She always says, I talk too much and I promote it too much. And she always says, you don't need to promote it. The right people will find it. And what I found is I've done a few videos out there, and then I'll get like an email from someone overseas saying, hey, I saw your video on beam therapy and it resonated with me. I need beam therapy. I was saying, yeah, join it. And they get huge benefits. There are many different holistic methods out there. And the reason that is because there's a lot of unique people out there. None of us are the same. So one method might call you. If that calls you, it's going to work for you. But you can force someone to have a beam therapy session and they're not open enough or there's too much resistance. It's not going to work for them. Your higher self has to give the okay. And on that, I just heard one more thing they would like me to talk about is beam therapy has something called the next layer syndrome. So this is a warning, but I always let people know of this. Before a beam therapy session, your higher self needs to prepare you. So 3 days, 2 days, 1 day before your session, you start to feel a little more anxious, a little more emotional, as your higher self starts to go through your field. It starts to pick out traumas, belief systems, events that have things you've seen, things you've heard, and it creates this icky layer. So what's in this icky layer? Let's get into the layer. The layer has about 1,000 things. It's about mixture of 2% of this childhood trauma, 5% of that childhood trauma, some past life stuff. There's ancestral wound stuff, belief things that you were told, like, do as I say, you don't matter, please me, all those things. So there are bits and pieces and chunks of stuff in that field. So when you come for a beam therapy session, there's this icky layer that you are sitting in, and it feels horrible, absolutely horrible. I have gotten comments from people, and I take it as a compliment. When I was driving to your house, I felt so nauseous. Everything inside me said, don't have my session. Or, Brenda, beam therapy, before I get it, I feel sick to my stomach. Like I feel so anxious and emotional. That's because you're in the layer that's being created to release. So it's very common. It doesn't happen to everybody, but when it happens, it's uncomfortable. It used to happen to me. Before a beam therapy session, about 24 hours before I would start going into the processing of things, I used to drive to my session in tears. I felt so crappy. I used to sit in front of Dr. Beattie. I would do the process, and then a lightness. Like it's just all lifted and it never comes back. Whatever you release during a beam therapy session never comes back. So your vibration, your frequency is increasing. That becomes your new average. So I love that feeling after a beam therapy session. It's a light feeling, this connection. I see things more clearly, but that becomes my new norm. And then I know I'm ready for the next layer. So how often should you do beam therapy? If you're really into your growth at this time and you really want to move quicker and quicker, I would say every 3 weeks you do a beam therapy session. And you kind of know, because after you've done one and you're feeling that light and elation, you're going to get that icky feeling again. Your higher self is telling you, okay, let's start another session. We're going to start pulling it up. And then people will say, Brenda, I need another beam therapy session. Okay, let's get you in. And then they go through that lightness again. So it's almost like you're always moving up, and then there's a little dip down, and that dip is your next layer. As you're preparing for the next session, you release it, you go back up, you level out, you go back a little bit down, you level up. Now, people will say, but say I don't want to do more than 5 sessions. Well, if your higher self knows you're not having another beam therapy session, it's not going to create it. You're ultimately under the control. You're in control. And your higher self is listening to you. Your higher self can nudge you, hey, go do another one. And some people say, I'm not doing another one. Well, then it kind of just shuts it down. But you keep where you're at. So there's a lot of clients that have done, say, 2 or 3 sessions, or even just 1 session, and they're at a new level. That stuff they released is gone. They may come back 2 years later and say, Brenda, whatever happened to me in that session was so great. I felt so different, but I just felt I wasn't ready to change much more in my life. So I stopped. But 2 years later, they come back and say, I'm now ready to go. And they'll go every 3 weeks. And then I'll just explain my experience with beam therapy. I was very motivated to get healthier. And as I was in trouble with my physical body, my mental body, my emotional, all of it. I was just a complete mess. But I was also a very motivated person to do the work. And I promote this all the time. Do the work, do the work, do the work. So during beam therapy, I committed to go every 3 weeks. And it was a drive. Like Dr. Beattie would not do it by video with me, although she could. She made me drive out to the East End, which was an hour to an hour and a half in traffic. But I always made it, although I may have been feeling really crappy as I was driving because I was in that layer. I'd have my session for an hour and I would leave. What I realized when I was doing that is I was so motivated. She always said, like, it's thunderstorm and you're still here. There's a snowstorm and you're still here. I said, I know. I just so committed. But that was also the start of my healing journey. And that's when I started to learn a lot of tips and tricks that I know today that I teach, because I was learning everything. I was reading books. I was practicing emotional freedom technique, Ho'oponopono, affirmations, meditation. Although I sucked at meditation, I was working at it really hard. That developed a way that I was able to learn it. There's just so many things. So during the 3 weeks before a beam therapy session, I worked on myself so much. So when I went to go see Dr. Beattie after 3 weeks, she would notice a big improvement in me. And she would say to me, how is it that with 1 beam therapy, you are making leaps and bounds? I've never seen anyone work that much. Like, how is it working so well on you? And I told her, beam therapy has lit up something inside me, my self-love. And with that crack, that turnkey, something happened. I was so committed to working on myself that I have not let one day go past by in 15 years where I haven't worked on myself. Even on my darkest days, when I was having those dark nights of the soul, I was tapping my stuff away. I was using affirmations. I was writing what I appreciate. I still do that to this day. The power of healing is within us. Tools like beam therapy, they're permission slips that allow you to use a method, have someone hold the space while you release. But there's so much you can do on your own. And it is my joy, it is my passion to help people realize how empowered you truly can be and how magnificent you truly are, and where you are is perfect and evolving. And you never give up on yourself. And yes, we can have great days and we can have crappy days, but even on those crappy days, you do something for yourself. learn something new, try something that's in your toolbox to get out of that funk you're in. And you work at it and you work at it and you never, never give up. Beam therapy saved my life. And if you want to give it a try in a group setting, it's this Thursday, December 19th, I'm so excited, our first very group healing of beam therapy. There's limited seating, 15 spots. They are filling up, but I am going to honor and do more of them because I really believe it is now needed more than ever. And I'm trying to bring it to the masses in the simplest way I know how. It is getting it out there through media like this, through emails, through words of mouth. If you know somebody who's suffering depression in teenagers, self-esteem issues, bedwetting in children, biting nails, there's fear there. Something's there that's freaking them out. Or fear and worry. You're not able to sleep. Beam therapy can work on so many different things because it's the emotions that cause all this chaos in our life. When we start to release that from our field and reconnect to our magnificence, you're going to see and feel your life change. But I want you to be patient. I want you to be consistent. I want you to do the work on yourself because you deserve it. And a lot of us are mothers and fathers or even friends, and we can hold the light for the people around us. So sometimes change starts with us, and as we start to change, people will say, hey, how are you getting better? This is a time of transformation. And if you're on this healing journey and you are awakened for a while or just awakening up, beam therapy might just be for you. But if you're not sure, book a discovery call. And if you are sure, either book an individual session or the group session. And we all know that with group, well, we don't all know, but I'm going to let you know, with the group, it is safe. We do a safe container, sacred space before we start. I do a lot of pre-work before and work afterwards. There is with a group, it's going to be over an hour because I'm going to make sure everyone's good before we go. So I'm going to say 90 minutes, but if I have to be on the call for 2 hours, so be it, I will. Because I want everyone's experience to be perfect for them. I want them to be able to come back and say, I want more. Why? Because you deserve it. And I always believe that the first beam session, your higher self is the most gentle to you during it. And not for everyone, because they don't want to scare anyone away. So they're very gentle. You'll feel the difference. But usually by the second time, they go a little bit harder and they release more. And that's your higher self just getting a bigger layer out for you. And you're just going to notice the changes. So generally, if you're starting with beam therapy, I'll have you fill up a form. And the form just gives you an idea of where you're at. And if you're committed to doing 5 sessions, great. Because if you do 5 sessions, I'll ask you to do another form. You fill it out and you're going to see how much you change. And you'll be like, well, how can I change in 5 sessions? The change is so subtle, people don't even notice they're changing. I'll give you an example, and then we'll end the call. Somebody writes down they can't sleep, they have anxiety, they're overwhelmed, they have all these little check marks everywhere. 5 sessions later, I'll ask them, so do you notice any changes in your life? Yeah, but I can't pinpoint what it was. Like, I don't think anything really changed. So I have them fill out the form. I then compare the two. I don't have so much time to do this all the time, but I still love doing it. And I remember like five sessions ago, you said you didn't sleep. Oh, no, I'm sleeping great now. I don't remember that. Okay, well, here's your form. You didn't sleep. Now you say you're sleeping well. Or, you're having headaches. All of a sudden your headaches are gone. I used to have tremendous migraines. Those stopped with beam therapy. My kidneys healed with beam therapy. All my other issues healed with beam therapy. And why is that? It's because my mind healed. And I started to allow the love that I deserved. And we all deserve it. So I'm going to end this. If anyone has any questions, you can always put it in the comment and I'll add them. There's a lot of information for beam therapy. It's so simple. And really all we need to know is, who can it benefit for? What pain points do you have that can help? How does it work? Give a general and then have an open mind. Anyone can join. It's very rare, but in some cases, it might not be something that someone's ready for yet. They might need a few other sessions to jump into beam therapy. But in the most cases, people who are excited about beam therapy are excited for a reason. It's that call in their heart and their higher self that says, yes, I want it. So thank you so much for joining today. It's a Saturday afternoon, and I know we have lots of things to do as we move into the holidays, but it's been a pleasure. I'll get this up, and you can always watch the recording. I'll have my discovery call link, and I'll also have the link for our very first registration for the beam therapy that's happening this Thursday at 7:30. Thank you all, and may you have a lovely day.